Something really crazy just happened. Jack Mallow suggests in a new interview that one of the first actions Donald Trump will take during his inauguration will be to issue an executive order or emergency law to make Bitcoin the strategic Bitcoin reserve in the US. That's super exciting. To pass an emergency law here to make Bitcoin the strategic Bitcoin reserve in the U.S. That's really exciting. He seems to have inside information here. He also talks about the Bitcoin purchases that will then take place, in what quantities this will happen, how it will happen. He has more details that he is releasing. Let's see what he has to say because this is really explosive. Right now, we have the issue that Donald Trump apparently wants to introduce a Bitcoin reserve, but there are other states that are kind of ahead of him on this. There are also other countries that are sort of front-running him too. And the only way to really be the first to implement such a law or establish a Bitcoin reserve on a large scale is by issuing an executive order. There are also other countries that are kind of front-running him on this. And the only way to truly and genuinely be the first to implement such a law or establish a Bitcoin reserve on a large scale is by issuing an executive order in order to achieve this in a significant manner. Check Mailers has some hot information that we're about to dive into.
And you're going to build a Bitcoin position with that. And the target is 1 million Bitcoin. I also know Trump is considering a day one executive order.
There's, sorry, a day one executive order for a Bitcoin reserve for the United States.
Yeah, but I know that in 2021, there are people looking at the Dollar Stabilization Act, which gives the president a lot of leeway to protect the dollar. There's potential to use a day one executive order to buy Bitcoin. It wouldn't be at the size and scale of 1 million coins, but it would be a significant position, and it would send a message that the United States, listen, here's what I think, isn't talked about enough regarding the strategic.
So he clearly said that he knows Donald Trump is planning an executive order here. So the question remains, what source does he really have here? But Jack Myers is not necessarily known for sharing any kind of misinformation or anything like that. I mean, he also has Strike, a company here in the background, and is actually known here for, let's say, more serious, reporting. Of course, he also wants to push Bitcoin, and of course, he also wants to push his own bags under certain circumstances. But I gotta say, this is definitely a really exciting topic being brought up, that Donald Trump could actually issue an executive order on day one, and that would definitely trigger a massive price rally. Jack Miller states his price target for 2025 is between 1 million. If this Bitcoin reserve succeeds, the Bitcoin price may surge. The 1 million Bitcoin by Cynthia Lunis, meaning the US will buy 1 million Bitcoin, won't occur immediately. It will be significant. He also says here, which is very important, that indeed the 1 million Bitcoin that Cynthia Lumis proposed here, that is, that the USA will buy 1 million Bitcoin, that this will not happen here on the first day, but that it will be a significant number of Bitcoins. I have no idea what significant means, but it could probably be. Well, for the state, anything below that isn't really significant, at least in my opinion. So let's assume the US buys Bitcoin relatively quickly. Donald Trump comes into office, issues an executive order, and says, hey, Bitcoin reserve strategy, and then buys Bitcoin pretty fast. But he would also need to follow up quickly. Because what happens if he only buys Bitcoin and doesn't act fast enough? Other states, other nations, and other countries will start front-running him because then a global FOMO will really kick in. That would put a lot of pressure on Germany and the EU, pushing them to do something similar. We always see that when the US does something, then the EU comes along later, like 2 or 3 months later, or 2 or 3 years later, or more like 2 or 3 decades later. And then they finally decide to get into Bitcoin or jump on the internet bandwagon or any other technologies. So if Donald Trump does this, he's also putting massive pressure on everyone else, and that's the crazy part. If Donald Trump rolls out a Bitcoin reserve strategy, or if he goes through with it, the chances that Russia will do the same, that China will do it, that Europe will follow suit probably won't just double but increase tenfold. That's the wild game theory at play. And the other way around, if Russia officially rolls out a Bitcoin reserve strategy, then the likelihood of the US doing the same doesn't just double, but increases tenfold. And if China does it, then the same goes for that. The chances of Russia, the US, and Europe following suit also multiply significantly. What's also interesting is that this executive order could lead to strengthening the dollar, giving it more trust. And if China does it, then the likelihood that Russia, the US, and Europe will do the same also increases significantly. And what is also interesting is that this executive order can lead to the dollar being strengthened and the dollar gaining more confidence. And that's the insidious part, because in the same podcast, he also talks about how no one should have to work for dollars, that the dollar is a Ponzi scheme. Those are some really explosive statements he's making that you all need to pay attention to.
Honestly, for me, no one should have to work for what someone else can just print. And so I don't deal in dollars just out of principle. I won't spend my life and waste my time and energy on what someone else can just print. The property's money needs to be scarce, that's the most important thing, but it also has to be sellable and liquid. You got to be able to trade it anytime for whatever you need. You need to be able to divide it up for liquidity. It's a tool for measuring in an economy. It should be able to measure anything from a grain of sand to a professional sports team. So it has to be able to handle any size transaction. It needs to be portable. I need to be able to move it. I got to be able to verify if it's the real deal. If I can't tell a fake from the genuine article, that's a problem. These are the qualities that determine whether a type of money is a good solution for the problem. Let me tell you where gold fell short. Gold fell short when you want a digital economy with billions of people, because you had to rely on a central party like a corporation or government to finalize transactions. When gold was physical, I went to the local butcher and handed him a gold coin. I went to the local tailor and handed him a gold coin, and it was peer-to-peer. Gold was okay when we scaled up to billions of people and got on the internet. I have to hand over my gold to the government and trust that Bitcoin is like digital gold. In this case, it's not just a physical bare instrument. It's a network. It's a network that can finalize transactions without needing a central party. That's why it's better.
I know this sounds a bit cliche, but you really need to just think it through. The US dollar system is a messed up system.
He's actually saying it pretty clearly. I mean, how messed up is that? We work for money, while someone else can just print it out of thin air. That obviously makes no sense at all. And now you have to ask yourself whether this makes sense for you. You go to work all day, 40 hours a week, and Christine Lagarde sits in her bunker and just presses the button and can print new money. That's an unfair system, and you have to consider if you should say, I won't participate in this system anymore. I'm going to be the change I want to see in the world. Jack Mallows emphasizes that it doesn't make sense to stay in that system, because every dollar that flows into it, those paid in dollars and traders in dollars are just supporting that system. The system works while people comply. If people realize, hey, this sucks, I won't be a slave to this, and they see Bitcoin offers a solution for peer-to-peer money independent of central banks, then you've got a massive leverage point. This means that the system works as long as people participate. When people realize, hey, this sucks, I'm not going to let myself be enslaved anymore, and they see that there's a solution with Bitcoin where they can have peer-to-peer money that's independent of the central bank, then you've got a massive leverage point. You don't have to go out on the streets and protest or anything. You just need to use Bitcoin and hold it, and that's really all there is to it. That's the cool thing about being able to do this here in El Salvador on a Bitcoin standard. He talks about the properties Bitcoin needs to become money, divisibility, reducibility, and measurability. These traits are better than fiat money and even gold. He mentions the comparison to gold, noting the gold standard has failed as it works well physically with coins. But we live in a digital world, and in a digital world, we always need interfaces and third parties. Currently, we have certificates that represent physical gold, so the certificates in circulation are like 80 or 100 times the actual physical gold market. Thus, the gold market, or rather the gold price, is massively manipulated. The problem is that we live in a digital world, and in a digital world, we always need interfaces and third parties. Right now, we have certificates that represent physical gold, which means the certificates in circulation are like 80 or 100 times the actual physical gold market that exists. That's why the gold market, or rather the gold price, is massively manipulated. And that's basically what Jack Mallows criticizes, why he says the gold standard has failed, because the gold standard only works in the physical world. In the digital world, we always have a trusted party, but that trust is eventually broken. We're already seeing massive dilution of the gold price because there are just way more certificates in circulation than there is physical gold. In the digital world, we always have a trusted party, but that trust eventually gets broken. And we're already seeing massive dilution of the gold price because there are just way more certificates in circulation than there is physical gold. And with Bitcoin, the interface between the physical and digital world is designed so perfectly that they can't just issue more Bitcoin or anything like that. You can verify at any time how much Bitcoin actually exists. You can't look into Fort Knox and see how much actual gold is there. You can't look into outer space and see how much physical gold is out there. With Bitcoin, it's different because of its much higher verifiability. And that's why Bitcoin is perfectly made for a digital world. And gold isn't a bad store of value or anything like that. It's not bad to talk about it or anything. But if we want to reintroduce a gold standard, then it's really just a step backward. And Bitcoin is simply the evolution of money. And here Bitcoin has simply fixed the problems that gold has. At the same time, Bitcoin has fixed the problems of fiat money and is probably the best candidate for money that we have here. And that's why it makes sense for the US to want to lean into Bitcoin. Donald Trump is looking to issue an executive order, and whether Jack Mallows is right about having insider info that Trump will sign the executive order on the first day is still up in the air. But if he does go through with it, that would be a massive catalyst. So now you can ask yourself, do you believe the news or not? But if he actually goes through with it, that would be a massive catalyst. And then you can simply ask yourself the question, okay, do you believe the message or do you not believe the message? If you believe the news, then you might consider running the whole front. And then it would definitely make sense, because if that's really true, then we have a mega catalyst here, probably the biggest catalyst we've ever had for Bitcoin. Bigger than the Bitcoin ETFs, bigger than any other news we've had. And it's going to be really, really exciting to see how this unfolds. I'll also put a link down below to 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily buy Bitcoin. Here, you can definitely see Donald Trump as a frontrunner, assuming he actually goes through with it. You have to look at it critically. Could also be that, let's say, Jack Mallers has some false information. On the other hand, you can't just take everything Donald Trump says at face value. You really have to look at it critically. So, I'm going to put a link down below to Bitcoin, where you can even get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin with the Bitcoin Hotel. And now check this out. I've got an awesome jump for you that you absolutely have to see, right from the waterfall in El Salvador. Drop a comment and rate this all-in Bitcoin jump from 1 to 21. What score would you give it?